Okay, Assalamualaikum dan selamat sejahtera kepada semua. I hope everybody can hear me. Boleh ya?
Ya, boleh dengar.
Okay, so selamat datang. Welcome saya ucapkan kepada session untuk hari ini. Terima kasih kepada semua yang hadir. So our training webinar session today adalah bertajuk Quantitative Research Design, Descriptive and Correlational Research, which will be akan disampaikan oleh Dr. Siti Nomi Alias, our trainer for today's webinar. But before we start, I would like to thank pihak CADe ya untuk inisiatif of organising webinar ni, yang mana kita boleh sama-sama share knowledge dan apa-apa pengetahuan boleh kita dapatkan daripada trainer, boleh juga kita share sesama sendiri. Okay, so I would just like to brief that sekiranya ada apa-apa soalan daripada para peserta, boleh diajukan terus kepada trainer kita, Dr. Siti Nomi Alias, atau sekiranya ada yang nak bertanyakan soalan melalui chat room ya, saya akan bacakan insyaAllah towards the end of the training session. Okay, sekiranya semua dah ready, without further ado, I would like to invite our trainer, Dr. Siti Nomi Alias untuk menyampaikan webinar kita pada hari ini. So silakan Dr. Siti Nomi.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to everyone. Okay, so before I start, before I get started, I would like to thank Kate again for the second time invitation for the webinar. Okay, and then I would like to thank Dr. Afika as well for her willingness to be my moderator for today's session. Okay, and then so let's proceed. Okay, so I'm going to cover the next topic on quantitative research design, in which previously I already shared the types of research design under quantitative research. So for today's session, I will be sharing on two types of research design under quantitative research. Okay, so this is my outline of the presentation today. Okay, so I'm going to share with you what is research design, the descriptive research design, and correlational research design. Okay, so what is research design? Okay, because some of us, we might get confused, even though we already identify our research paradigm, either qualitative or quantitative. So why do we still need to identify our research design? Okay, so by definition, so the research design is an overall strategy that we choose to integrate the different components of the study in a coherent and logical way. So in which, most specifically under chapter 3, in which after we already completed our proposal and then we are ready to run our research. So on here, we need to strategize our work. So how we need to, what methods that we need to apply to proceed with our data collection, how many numbers that we need in our study. Okay, and then what kind of reliability or validity that we need to apply in our research, and so on. So that is why we need to specify our research design. Okay, so it is also the need for an accurate research design. Okay, so based on our research objective, our statement of problem, or our research question, we need to specifically identify our research design so that we can accurately conduct our study. Okay, so it can effectively address the research problem, in which it constitutes the blueprint for the collection, measurement, and analysis of data. So through the selection of research design, it will determine the most suitable data collection procedure for us. Okay, the types of measurement. Okay, either it is nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio, and then the types of analysis that is suitable for the characteristic of our data. Okay, and then everybody should be reminded that the research problem determines the type of research design that we want to use, not the other way around. Okay, please do not choose your design at the first place before you identify your research problem. Okay, the research problem should come first, the research objective should come first, only then you identify the most suitable research design. Okay. Okay, so we proceed further with the descriptive research. Okay, so the descriptive research, the main goal is to describe a single variable or to obtain separate description for each variable when several are involved in as they exist. Okay, so meaning that the descriptive research, the concern is about describing the variable. Describing the single variable or probably multiple variables. Okay, if let's say your study involve multiple variables, okay, but the concern is you want to describe each individual variables, okay, and then it does not concern with relationships between variables. Okay, there is no intention to differentiate, there is no intention to correlate, okay, the intention just to describe, okay, and then the focus on description on individual variables, okay, and then so that is why the descriptive research is a very useful as preliminary research in which at early stage of research in its own right to gain some idea of the variable of interest as it naturally exists. Okay, so the result from descriptive research will help us to capture interesting naturally occurring behavior. Okay. Then, okay, so these are the examples, the examples of descriptive research. For example, okay, the statistic produced by Department of Statistics Malaysia related to demographic Malaysian demographic factors. For example, the live birth, okay, and then the death, okay, and then the salary. Okay, so these are the example of descriptive research. Okay, and then the result is the descriptive data. Okay. Okay, so in general, there are three types of descriptive research. So we have the observational research, survey research, and case study research design. Okay, so the observational research related to the researcher observe and systematically records the behavior of individuals for the purpose of describing behavior. Okay, for example, the mating behavior of birds, parent-child interaction on a playground, or the shopping behavior in a mall. So these are the example of observational research. So we will go further in detail later on. Okay, the second one is survey research. Okay, survey research is a research study that use a survey to obtain a description of a particular group of individual. Okay, by the way, before I forgot, observational research ni there is a continuum or a debate, either it should be located under non-experimental research or experimental research. Okay, and then sometimes it's also possible to be used as one of data collection procedure under qualitative. Okay, later on we will discuss in detail about observational research. But survey research, by the name of survey, okay, it is a very clear cut that it should be located under non-experimental research, okay, in which the main purpose is to obtain a description of a particular group. Okay, for example, election polling. So we try to capture the information regarding the citizens' preference on their next candidate for prime minister, for example. Okay, so next one is case study. So it is related to the in-depth study and detailed description of a single individual or a very small group related to a certain phenomenon. Okay, so example, it is widely used in clinical psychology to determine the rare phenomena or to determine or rare cases or disease. Okay. Okay, so if let's say the observational research design we look at from the perspective of measurement technique. Okay, so behavioral observation can be used in a variety of research strategies, including experimental and correlational design. It's what I said earlier, there is a continuum actually under the observational research. Either it should be located under experimental research, non-experimental, or qualitative study. Okay, if let's say the concern is just on describing the individual variable, meaning that you just observe an occurrence of certain phenomena only without any interest to correlate or to differentiate with any variable. So therefore it should be located under non-experimental design. But if let's say there are certain intervention that you include in your observation, then this one should prone towards experimental research. Okay. And then, if let's say, okay, and then the study using behavioral observation simply for descriptive purpose is classified as an observational research design. So if let's say the purpose just to describe, okay, okay, and then just a caution. Okay, many researchers assume all research studies that use behavioral observation are observational research design. Okay, however, observation can be used to measure variables in a variety of different design, but the defining element of an observational research design is that the result of the observations are used simply to describe the variable being studied. So this is the differentiation between the behavioral observation with observational research design. Okay, in which the purpose that we observe, in which just to describe. Okay, so the techniques to quantify observation, okay, so there are three recommended techniques that we can use to quantify our observation. Okay, so the first one by using the frequency method, okay, in which we just count the instance of each specific behavior that occur during a fixed time observation period. Okay, the example is very simple. For example, the child committed 3 aggressive acts during 30 minutes period. Okay, and this is an example. Okay, the second one is duration method. Okay, in which the researcher record how much time an individual spends engaged in a specific behavior during a fixed time observation period. Okay, in which we locate a certain duration to measure the variable. Okay, for example, the child spent 18 minutes playing alone during the 30-minute period. Okay, and then next one, interval method, in which we divide the observation period into a series of intervals and then record whether a specific behavior occurs during each interval. Okay, so for example, in the 30-minute observation period, we divide into 30. So there is a 1-minute interval. So during 1-minute interval, so how many aggressive behavior happen, for example? Okay, so these are the three techniques that we can use to quantify our observation, because this the discussion today is on quantitative. So we try to translate any information that we get from the observation into numerical data. Okay. Okay, the strengths and weaknesses of observational research design. Okay, in which the strength is the researcher observe and records actual behavior. Okay, in which, if let's say in survey research, for example, it relies on participants' reports of the individual. Okay, so in observational research, you can see, okay, you can see in actual, okay, how does a certain behavior happen. Okay, and then participant can distort or conceal the accuracy of or the truthiness of their responses in survey research. Okay, because in survey research, it is based on their opinion. Meanwhile, for observational research, it is based on the actual behavior. Okay, and then observational research have high external validity because, as what I said, it happened in a field setting, live. Okay, and then it tends to have higher external validity. Okay, because it is really happening. Okay, and then it is offer the flexibility in which a researcher can complete a comprehensive observation of antecedents, behaviors, and consequences of the behavior, whereas other studies examine a single discrete behavior. Because of what? During our observation, for example, when you observe mating behavior among cats, for example, so you can see the whole story, the whole situation. You can observe the antecedent, the consequences, okay, and then probably the other factors that might be related to the mating behavior. Okay, so the scope might be larger lah. Okay. And then the weaknesses include the ethical concern about spying on people. Okay, if let's say the participants are not aware that their behavior is being observed, so the researcher may be violating a person's privacy and right to choose to participate in the study. Okay, so we need to be very careful with this issue lah. Okay, and then we simply describe behavior and do not examine its causes. So if let's say this one, the flexibility ni, if I say if the concern is beyond the descriptive, in which you proceed further with the next purpose, which is to differentiate, which to look for the correlation and so on. So this one probably will be an advantage. But as what I say, for the observational research design, we just focus on the single variable. Okay. So therefore, it just simply describe behavior and do not examine its causes. Okay, so any question related to observational research design before I proceed to the second types of research design under descriptive research design? Okay, so the second type of research design under the descriptive research design is the survey research design. So probably this one that I want to highlight in detail lah. Wait, just this one, forgot to delete. Okay, so survey and questionnaires are extensively used in the behavioral sciences as relatively efficient ways to gather large amounts of information. Most of our either the students, the PhD, master or undergraduate students, they are more interested in using the survey and questionnaire research. Okay, and then the terms, so that's why the terms, sometimes the terms are reflecting the same thing, questionnaires, survey. Okay, they reflect the same thing, and then sometimes the candidate got confused. Okay, the questionnaire, is it survey, questionnaire? Is it the same thing? Is it, there is a questionnaire research design? Okay, so that's why I really, I would like to differentiate between the two terms. The questionnaire probably we use when we have the combination of several constructs within our instrument, within our questionnaire. Okay, in our booklet, we have several constructs. Okay, so probably then we call it questionnaire. But the survey, it is more suitable to be used to refer to a specific research design, which is survey research design. Okay, so we use the survey research design to obtain self-reported answers about attitudes, opinions, personal characteristics, and behavior. If let's say we compare with the previous design, observational research design, it is more on the actual behavior that being conducted by the individual, but this one is based on self-reported. Okay, self-reported. So rather than observe, we simply ask question. Okay, so probably we can have a little bit shortcut there. We just ask their preference, for example. So we already save some time. Okay, and then a researcher does not have to wait until a behavior or response occur. For example, it is not necessarily to wait until after an election to discover people's attitude about candidates or issues. Or we can, then meaning that we can ask our respondents anytime. Okay, and then survey can be used to obtain score for a variety of different research design, meaning that it can be a basis for several research design. For example, it can be a basis, a foundation for correlational research design. Okay, and then it also can be a foundation for experimental research. okay, by providing the descriptive data related to the respondent, probably. Okay, and then a study, a study using the result from a survey simply for descriptive purpose is classified as the survey research design. Okay, so this one is very clear cut. Okay, so again, it's focused on specific characteristics such as eating behavior or political attitudes, or a more complex picture of a variety of behavior and opinion. Okay, for example, we want to investigate the alcohol use at a local high school. Okay, and then it may depend on the type of question that we ask. Okay, probably it is an open-ended, closed-ended, okay, restricted question. Okay, so the result could provide a description of how many students drink alcohol, how much they drink, and when and where. Okay, so here the types of question that we ask to our respondent also will reflect the continuum of descriptive research design. Either it should be located under qualitative, quantitative, okay, or non-experimental. Okay, so either one, depending. If let's say the answer that you ask is open-ended, so probably it requires more explanation, then it is more suitable to be located under the qualitative. Okay, because it's very difficult to transform the explanation or wording answer in terms of numbers. Okay, and then after question could yield a description of student attitudes toward alcohol use among their peers. Okay, a common application of survey research is by companies to obtain more accurate description of their customers. Okay, so the survey research ni memang most of the time being used by industry, by public organization or private organization, because somehow by having the descriptive analysis, they can provide them with decision making power. Okay, for example, how many numbers of their employees has been hired, for example, has been fired, has left the company. Okay, how many percentage of their employees are engaged at work. Okay, so the main concern is just to describe that particular individual variable. Okay, so another example, when you buy an electronic device, a warranty registration card usually accompanies it. Okay, so in addition to your name and address and the serial number of the product, so other demographic questions that usually been asked include your age, occupation, the income, and then where did you hear about the product. Okay, so because the main purpose is they want to obtain the demographic characteristics of customer to add description of the people who are likely to buy this product, so that in the future it can help them to make decision in better targeting their advertising work. Okay. Okay, so in survey research, so there are a few steps that we can follow to increase the accuracy. Okay, so the first one, it depends on the types of survey question that we develop. Okay, either it is open-ended, closed-ended, restricted, rating type. Okay, because this one also will determine how we are going to analyze our data. Okay, and then the second one is the question must be assembled and organized to produce a well-constructed survey. This one, I have another slide to explain further. Okay, next one, a selection process must be developed to determine exactly who will participate in the survey and who will not, because survey participants must be representative of the general group to be studied. Okay, so because if let's say you conduct the quantitative research, the one of the main intention is for the representativeness or the generalization. So that is why care must be given in the selection process of your respondent. Okay, and then the next one is the researcher must determine how the survey will be administered. Okay, either it is through printed survey, either it is through telephone call, or the participant completes the question online in an internet survey or in person. Okay. Okay, so the first one, the first concern is the types of question. Okay, so there are different ways to ask participant for self-report information. Sometimes, okay, the question that we ask just require them to just to just answer yes or no. It is sufficient for that purpose. Okay, for example, are you happy with this product? Yes, no. Okay, and then you may want a quantitative answer. Okay, sometimes how much probably you spend this month for the for electronic product. Okay, and then how often you buy electronic products, for example. Okay, so this one will reflect the types of answer that you are going to have in your finding. Okay, and then different types of question encourage different types of response. Okay, for example, different types of question permit different degrees of freedom in the participants' answer. Okay, so for example, a question may severely restrict response option. For example, which of the following 3 flavors of ice cream do you prefer? Then you provide the answer. 1, vanilla, for example. 2, strawberry. Okay, it is a very restricted answer in which you already provided your respondent with the answer. Okay, or a question may give each participant complete freedom in choosing a response. For example, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? Okay, so then you give 100% freedom for your respondent to give the answer, to elaborate, to explain their preferences. Okay, and then the wording of a question also can introduce bias into participants' answer. Okay, so are you one of those blind, unimaginative people who prefer vanilla ice cream? So this one is we already embed a certain probably discriminating or biased question to our respondent. Okay, and then different types of question permit different types of statistical analysis and interpretation. Okay, so that's what I said. So probably if your answer based on yes or no, so you may come up with the frequency only. Okay. And then probably if the answer is based on like scale, then you can come up with the average, mean, and so on. Okay. Okay, and then constructing a survey. Okay, so once the survey question has been determined, so the next step is you organize the question in a coherent survey that participant can easily understand and complete your survey. Okay, so there are few guidelines that we may follow. Okay, the first one, so the demographic questions are recommended to be placed at the end of the survey. So the demographic question, sometimes when you want to locate your demographic factors or the demographic question, not necessarily you follow what has been used by previous researcher. The demographic question that should be included in your study, it should be based on the setting of your study. Okay, you should know what are the function of each demographic question. Okay, and then these items are considered boring, and you do not want participants to quit because they are bored by the first few questions. Okay, so in addition, identifying age, race, or gender may influence how the participant answers a survey question that relate to this variable. Okay, the second one is sensitive question or items that may cause embarrassment or discomfort should be placed in the middle of the survey. Okay, so by the time participants encounter these items, they are more likely to have warmed up to the topic and become committed to completing the survey. Okay, next one, question dealing with the same general topic should be grouped together. For example, if you have the like scale items within your instrument, then you put it in one place. Okay, the items that is based on open-ended question, then you locate it in one place. Okay. Okay, so grouping questions simplifies the survey so participants do not have to jump from one topic to another or switch from one type of question to another. Okay, so next one, if participants are going to read the survey, the format for each page should be relatively simple and uncluttered. Okay, so questions that are crammed together and seem to fill every square inch of the page create an overwhelming appearance that can intimidate participants. So that is why you need to put some care on the font size, okay, on the margination, the color, okay? And then vocabulary and language style should be easy for participants to understand. Okay, a survey with language appropriate for college students probably would not be appropriate for elementary school students. Okay, and then sometimes the words that are being used in Western countries are not really familiar in developing nations. So that's why we need to make sure that the items or the question that we develop suit specifically to our respondent. Okay, so probably if you are interested to have further reading, so these are the recommended sources. Okay. Okay, so next is selecting relevant and representative individual or respondent. Okay, as what I said, the quantitative, when you conduct the quantitative, our concern is more on making the generalization and representativeness. Okay, so the survey research design introduced a few additional concerns regarding sample selection. Okay, so the first one, okay, many survey address a specific issue that is relevant to only a small subset of the general population, because somehow the focus is just for specific groups. Okay, so for such a survey, care must be given to select survey participants to whom the questions are relevant. Okay, for a survey about childcare issues, okay, the participants should be parents with small children. Okay, and then a sensible strategy might be to hand out survey to parents as they pick up their children at childcare centers around the city. Okay, so maksudnya we need to strategize our work so that we apply the randomization when we select our respondent, and then when we do our when we apply our randomization, it is not go beyond the target population. Okay, and then you might obtain mailing lists. Another option, you might obtain mailing lists from different childcare centers. Okay, you need to do some work. You need to do some homework lah. Okay, to identify how many childcare centers are available in that location. Okay, and then participants for a shopping survey might be selected from the people in a shopping mall, and participants for an education survey could come from the parents of children in a local school district. Okay. The next one is some surveys so probably seek to describe a broad cross-section of the general population. So in this case, the sample of survey must not be too restricted. Okay, so administer the survey, for example, administering the survey to the students in a psychology class would not result in an accurate description of the political attitude of people in the community. So in which a researcher should take some time to identify the group to be described, then make an effort to select individuals who accurately represent the group. Okay. So then, if let's say your study involve a large population, then probably this is another option lah. You may seek for professional help preparing survey and identifying participants. So this is what has been applied by most organization. Okay, they identify or the organization that that can conduct the research on behalf of their organization. Okay, so based on the 3 research design, okay. Actually, there is another one, the case study. I forgot. Okay, but the case study I'm not I'm not explaining in detail here because case study ni most of the time being used in qualitative. Okay, in qualitative research lah most of the time. Okay. Okay, and then this one Okay, so the statistical procedure based on the descriptive research design. Sorry, the survey research design. That's what I said because with the interest is on describing. Okay, so the statistical procedure that apply to the data from the survey research design, the univariate statistical analysis. Okay, so the univariate statistical ni sometimes been called as descriptive analysis, descriptive statistic. Okay, it is the simplest form of quantitative analysis. Okay, in which the analysis of a single variable for the purpose of description. Okay, again, the main purpose of using this analysis is to just describe the variable. Okay, it does not deal with causes or relationship. Okay, and then example of data that we use under this type of analysis include measure of central tendency. Okay, we have mean, mode, and medium. Okay, salah this is not median, N. Okay, and then it's used dispersion method like range, variance, maximum, minimum, quartile, standard deviation, okay, interquartile range, okay, and then frequency distribution. Okay, and then its results show in bar graph, histogram, pie chart, line graph, box and whisker plot. Okay, done. Okay, so far any question related to the design? Okay, no. Next one of the most popular research design among students. Okay, so the correlational research design. Sometimes even though the student they apply the correlational research design, okay, you may also mention the descriptive research design under your bigger study. Okay, because after all, even though the main purpose, for example, the main purpose of your study is to identify the relationship between variables, but before you proceed with the main objective, so probably you have the objective related to determine the level of your variable. So the level of your variable, okay, the level meaning that you try to describe the level of individual variable. So this is also can be called as part of survey research design. Okay, or descriptive research design, it would be better. Okay, descriptive research design, because you describe the individual variable before you proceed with the relationship between variable. Okay, so the goal of correlational research design is to examine and describe the associations and relationship between variable. Okay, that's what they call name lah. Okay. And then more specifically, the purpose of a correlational study is to establish that a relationship exists. A relationship exists between variables, and to describe the nature of the relationship. Okay, to describe the nature of relationship. Okay, and then but the correlational strategy does not attempt to explain the relationship and makes no attempt to manipulate, control, or interfere with the variable. Okay, so we need to aware about this limitation of correlational research. We cannot use the result of correlation to explain the relationship. We just can describe about the existence of the relationship and then the nature of the relationship. What are the points that we can describe under this nature of relationship? I will share later on. Okay, so the data for a correlational study consists of 2 or more measurements. So basically in correlational, we have the minimum of 2 lah. 2, meaning that 1 for independent variable, second one for dependent variable. Okay, and then probably more. 1 for each of the variables being examined. Okay, and then usually the score are obtained from the same individual. Okay, meaning that we collect our data from similar individual. Okay, and then for example, a researcher might record IQ and measure creativity for each person in a group of college students. Or a researcher could record food consumption and activity level for each animal in a colony of laboratory rats. Okay, and then measurement can be made in natural surrounding or the individuals can be measured in lab setting. Okay, and then the important factor that the researcher simply measure the variables being studied. Okay, the measurement are then examined to determine whether they show any consistent pattern of relationship. Okay. So, in correlational research strategy, so we measure 2 or more variables. Okay, and then we get the score for each individual. Okay, so this is the example of correlational research design. Okay, by Trocker and Clay. Okay, in which the study examine the relationship between grade point average and sleep habits, specifically wake up time for college students. Okay, so the researcher measured the grade point average and wake up time for each individual in a group of college students and found that earlier wake up times were consistently related to higher grade point average. It is related. Okay. And then, even though the study demonstrates a relationship between the 2 variables, but we need we need to be careful that it does not explain why the relationship exists. Okay, they do not provide us with detailed explanation why the relationship exists. Okay, and then specifically, the results do not justify a conclusion that waking earlier causes higher grade, meaning that there is no cause and effect findings for correlational study. Okay, it just limited to the relationship or the association between variables only. Okay, it does not explain the cause and effect. Okay, so data for a correlational study. Correlational study produce two or more score for each individual. Okay, and then sometimes the researchers are interested in the relationship between two variables at a time. So therefore, multiple scores are typically grouped into pairs for evaluation. Okay, and then traditionally the score in each pair identified as X and Y, dependent or independent. Okay, the Y ni basically we use to reflect the dependent variable, X is the independent variable. Okay, so the data can be presented in a list showing the two scores for each individual of the score. Okay, and then in most of the time we use the scatter plot. Okay, so in scatter plot, it's represented by a single point with horizontal coordinate determined by the individual's X score and the vertical coordinate corresponding to the Y score. So this is the example, the illustration for scatter plot. Okay, in which we can see how does the data located within the graph. Okay. So in terms of the statistical procedure that is suitable for correlational research, okay, so we have two types of statistics in general to determine the relationship between variable, okay, in correlational research design. Okay, so we have Pearson correlation or Spearman correlation or Spearman rank order correlation. Okay, so Spearman correlation ni mostly suitable for continuous data. If let's say you have your both IV and DVs are in either ratio or interval scale of measurement, then it met the normality assumption, then you can proceed with this type of analysis. Okay, and then we use italic art to represent the Pearson correlation coefficient. Okay, meanwhile for Spearman rank order correlation, okay, this type of statistical analysis we use when we have categorical data specifically in ranking form. Ranking means that it is at least at ordinal. Sorry, bukan at least, memang ordinal lah, ordinal data. Okay, it is in ranking form. Okay, or you can also use a Spearman rank order correlation if let's say you have the continuous data, interval or ratio, but the data do not meet the assumption of normality. So then you may prefer to use this one. Okay. Okay, to measure the relationship, okay, again we use correlation coefficient. Okay, either it is RS or R, depending on the type of statistical analysis. Okay, so when we measure the relationship through the correlation coefficient, we probably interested to describe the nature of the relationship in three main points. Okay, the first one is based on the direction of relationship. Okay, the direction of relationship. So the direction of relationship between variables are either negative or positive. Okay, positive means that if there is an increment in X, Y also will increase. If there is the decrease in X, Y also decrease. Okay, so if I may illustrate, okay, if let's say this is Y, X, okay, if let's say the line is like this, moving upward, okay, so mean that increase in X, Y increase. So this one is a positive relationship. Okay. Okay, so next one, if let's say the graph, the line is moving downward like this. Okay, decrease in X, Y also Y increase, sorry. So this one decrease in Y. Okay. Okay. So increase in X, decrease in X. Okay, increase in Y. So this one is negative relationship. Okay. Okay, so this one I thought is very easy. Okay, so next one, the characteristic 2, which is the form of relationship. Okay, so the form of relationship. Sometimes the researcher are interested to see the linear relationship between variable. Linear means that the relationship between both variables can be graphed in one straight line. Okay, so in which the data located around the straight line. Okay, and then the characteristic, the last characteristic is in terms of the strength or the magnitude of relationship. Okay, so the largest, the highest magnitude of relationship is 1. Okay, the direction doesn't matter the direction. Okay, but the highest value of correlation is 1. The smallest is 0, which is it indicates that there is no relationship. Okay. Okay. Okay, to elaborate further in terms of the strength or magnitude of relationship, okay, you might consider to use the Guilford rule of thumb. Okay, so that you can provide more explanation. If let's say the findings indicate that the R value is 0.3, 0.3, for example. So rather than you just explain the direction of the relationship, so probably you can add that there is a low relationship between X and Y. Okay, so you add more flavor in your description of the finding. Okay, another option that you can also use is the Cohen rule of thumb. Okay, so the Cohen only provide you with 3 indicators, 0.1, 0.3, 0.5. Okay, you can also use this guideline to elaborate your R value, correlation coefficient. Okay, so these are the applications of correlational research design, in which it provides a basic information needed to make prediction. Okay, based on the finding of correlation. If let's say you find a consistent pattern of the relationship between your variable, then you can proceed further with making the prediction. Okay, so for example, research shows a good positive relationship between scholastic assessment test or SAT score and future grade point average. So meaning that based on these findings, so probably the university, the college officer may just pick or choose the student or candidate with high score in SAT test, in SAT test. Okay, so based on the finding, they can make prediction because based those who have higher SAT score, SAT score, then means that they can survive better during their life in university. Okay, and then when we want to make prediction, we use the regression, in which the goal for regression is to find the equation that produce the most accurate prediction of Y, which is the criterion variable for each value of X. Okay, so we based on the finding of correlation, we can proceed further with making the prediction through regression to come up with regression equation. Okay, so next one is based on correlation, it can determine the reliability and validity. Okay, reliability evaluates the consistency or stability of the measurement. If let's say you use correlation in determine the association between the items, for example, and then you evaluate, you can determine the reliability. Then same goes to validity, in which it evaluates the extent to which the measurement procedure actually measures what it claims to be measuring. Okay, and then next one, we are able to evaluate the theories. Okay, evaluating theories, because sometimes based on past study, for example, they come up with a theory, a new theory related to a certain phenomena, for example. But based on correlational research, you can reconduct the study and then try to test or validate the applicability of the theory. Okay, and then last one, interpreting a correlation, which is, sorry, this one tak ada ni. Lupa nak tukar that one. Okay. This one, the example of research of that making the prediction of a correlational study. Okay, so the first one, the study by Ng and Jeffrey, 2003, in which they use regression to predict health behavior for working adults using stress as the predictive variable. Okay, so the predictive variable is stress. So the result showed that higher level of stress predicted a higher fat diet and more cigarette smoking. Okay, but okay, when he ran the regression analysis, the stress was not significant predictor of alcohol. Okay, there is a relationship, but they do not predict. Okay, and then in situation in which a correlational study is not used for prediction, researchers still tend to refer to a predictor and a criterion variable. Criterion is referring to the dependent. In these situations, the levels are usually determined by the purpose of the study. And then correlational study begins with one of the two variables relatively known or understood, and the second variable is relatively unknown. Okay, and then the purpose is to gain a better understanding of the unknown variable by demonstrating that it is related to an established known variable. Okay, so this is another example lah. Okay. Next one, reliability and validity. Okay, so both reliability and validity are commonly defined by relationships that are established using the correlational research design. Okay, for example, test-retest reliability is defined by the relationship between an original set of measurement or construct, okay, and a follow-up set of measurement. Okay, if the same individual are measured twice under the same condition, and then there is a consistent relationship between the two measurements, then therefore we can conclude that the procedure is said to be reliable. Okay, and then the concurrent validity of a measurement procedure can also be defined in terms of a relationship. If a test is developed to detect early stage Alzheimer's disease, for example. Okay, so the validity of the test can be established by demonstrate that the score from the test are strongly related to the score from established tests. Okay, so this is the concurrent validity that can be proved through the correlational research design. And then this is another example lah. Okay, and then this one example on how we can evaluate the theory through the correlational research design. Okay, for example, there is one study. Okay, this one by British psychologist Cyril Bird. Okay, showed a strong relationship between the twins' IQs, suggesting that heredity factors overwhelm environment. So this is a quite well-known finding lah by Bird. Okay, but later evidence showed that Bird probably falsified much of his data. Okay, based on Cummins' 1974 study. This one is quite outdated lah, but this is just to provide you the example. Okay. Based on the finding that being conducted by Cummins, okay, they suggest a strong relationship between twins' IQs. And then note that the correlational research design is being used to address a theoretical issue. So there is something wrong with the previous finding. Okay. Okay, next one, interpreting a correlation. Okay, when we want to interpret the correlation, okay, so again, it be based on the value of R value, okay, 0 to 1, the range, okay, in which it can describe the consistency of the relationship and then indicate a perfect correlation if, let's say, the value is 1 or 0 indicate a complete lack of consistency or there is no relationship. Okay, there are few additional factors that we can add to interpret the strength of relationship. Rather than just using the correlation coefficient, we also can elaborate the nature of relationship in terms of coefficient of determination. Okay, this one we just square the correlation coefficient value. Okay, just square the correlation coefficient value, then we get the coefficient of determination value. Okay, this one we may found it in regression analysis, R squared. Okay, and then we can elaborate, we can interpret the correlation through the significance of the correlation. Okay, so the first one, the strength of correlation is, I thought it's quite easy lah, in which we it just explain, it further explain the correlation between the variable by explain how much variance, okay, of the occurrence of DV is due to your IV. Okay, so for example here, a correlation of R 0.8 would mean that R squared equals to 0.64. Okay, in which based on this 0.64, we transform into percentage, referring to 64% of the differences in grade point average can be predicted by difference in IQ. This is how we can elaborate the R squared, coefficient of determination. Okay, and then another example, a correlation of R equals to 0.3 would mean that only equals to 0.09, which is equivalent to 9% of the differences are predictable. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is the guideline, okay, that we can use to interpret, to further interpret, to add on to whatever we have just now. Okay, so guideline for interpreting the strength of a correlation based on correlation of determination, coefficient of determination, sorry. Okay. Okay, so next one is the significance of relationship, okay, in which the terms means that a correlation found in the sample data is very unlikely to have been produced by random variation, meaning that it happened not because of chance. It happened because of it's really happening. Okay. And then whenever a sample correlation is found to be significant, we can reasonably conclude that it represents a real relationship that exists in the population. So that is why it is really important for us to report the significance of the relationship. Okay. And then with a small sample, okay, it is possible to obtain what appears to be a very strong correlation. In a small sample size, for example, that include only 2 samples. Okay, so for example, all the samples score high in certain construct that you want to study. Okay, so probably you can guarantee they fit perfectly on a straight line. Okay, so that's why for a sample of 2 individuals, you will always obtain a perfect correlation. Okay, either it is positive or negative. Okay, but as the sample size increase, it becomes increasingly more likely that the sample correlation accurately represent the real relationship that exists in the population. So that is why in quantitative study, as much as possible, we want to secure a large number of respondents. Okay. Okay, and then okay, a correlation found in a relatively large sample is usually an indication of a real, meaningful relationship and is likely to be significant. But how large sample, how large that you need in your study, okay, you need to have another consideration lah. Okay, and then a statistically significant correlation does not necessarily mean that the correlation is large or strong. So we need to bear in mind lah. Okay, if let's say you found that there is a statistically significant correlation, it does not mean that the R value also give you a very strong relationship between the variables. Okay, and then with a very large sample, for example, it is possible for a correlation of R equals to 0.1 or smaller to be statistically significant. Okay, but in some cases, even though the finding of correlation value that you have is only 0.1, and then it is significant, even though based on Guilford rule of thumb, this value considered to be negligible or somehow very small relationship, but in certain research that is still limited in terms of the number of study being conducted in the area, it is actually provide a very significant finding. Okay, even the value is very small. The magnitude of the relationship is very small. but due to the number of study that is very limited in the literature, then it provides a very important insights into the area. Okay, so researcher, okay, you need to bear in mind the value ni, it give meaning, different meaning depending on the area of your study. Okay. Okay, so the strengths and weaknesses of correlational research design. Okay, so correlational research design is mostly been used for preliminary work in an area that has not received a lot of research attention. Okay, in which it will attract more impactful research based on the finding. Okay, and then the correlational research design can identify variables and describe relationships between variables that might suggest further investigation using experimental strategy to determine cause and effect relationship. Okay, it can be a basis for more impactful research. Okay, one of the most impactful research is experimental lah, because it can provide the cause and effect relationship between the variables. Okay, and then it allows researcher an opportunity to investigate variables that would be impossible or unethical to manipulate. Okay, because sometimes there are certain variables that are unethical to be conducted in laboratory or in manipulative situation. Okay, so that's why it provides options to the researcher. Okay, and then it is possible. Okay, so countless other variables such as family, personality, alcohol consumption, level of education, income, and color preference can be interesting topics for behavior research, but cannot be manipulated and controlled in an experimental research design. Okay, okay, and then okay, so another advantage of correlational research is that the researcher simply records what exists naturally without having any intervention. Okay, and then it does not include manipulative, control, or otherwise interfere with the variable being examined or with the surrounding environment. Okay, and then there is good reason to expect that the measurement and the relationship accurately reflect the natural events being examined. Okay, and then okay, so this one is referring to external validity. Okay, and then correlational study usually does not produce a clear and unambiguous explanation for the relationship. So this one of the biggest limitation lah of the correlational study. Okay, so that's why the result is low internal validity. We cannot provide detailed explanation for the relationship between variable. Okay, and then another limitations of correlational study. The first one is the third variable problem. Okay, meaning that even though the correlational study may establish that two variables are related, it does not mean that there must be a direct relationship between the two variables. Okay, so that's why probably when you conduct the study that have the third variable, either mediator or moderator, okay, it can cater this issue. Okay, for example lah Okay, next one, the directionality problem. Okay, in which a correlational study can establish that two variables are related. There is the change in one variable can be accompanied by changes in the other variable. Okay, but in correlational study, it does not determine which variable is the cause and which is the effect. Okay, so there is no cause and effect conclusion that you can come out through the correlational research design. Okay. Okay, so this is the summary lah, the summary of the strengths and weaknesses of the correlational research design. Okay. Okay, so this even though the students are it is okay for the researcher to conduct a study that just include two variables, but most of the time it is better if, let's say, you can include more variables in your study. Because why? Because sometimes when we have more options in our study, then we can apply hierarchical regression. Okay, because when we apply the hierarchical regression, we can somehow we can see the how many contribution of each variable when we enter into the equation. Okay, so that is why here I touch a little bit on multiple regression, in which for example, the criteria variables such as academic performance can be explained or predicted from a set of predictor behaviors such as IQ and motivation. So for example, IQ predicts part of academic performance, but you can get a better prediction if you use IQ and motivation together. Because when we include more variable, then we can strengthen our regression model. Okay. Okay, so this is one interesting use of multiple regression is to examine the relationship between two specific variables which control the influence of other potentially confounding variable. This is what we can do in hierarchical regression in IBM SPSS. Okay, so by adding predictor variable 1 at a time in the regression analysis, it is possibly to see how each new variable adds to the prediction after the influence of the earlier predictor. We can see either there is a addition, okay, the decrease or increase in the number of predicted value after we add a new variable in our model. Okay, and then this is the example lah. Okay, so another one, this is the last slide if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so the language that we use to discuss the reports and results of multiple linear regression can be misleading. Okay, so we need to put extra caution here. For example, when you will occasionally see reports that the predictor variables explain the observed differences in the criterion variable. For example, a report might say that regression has demonstrated that variables such as intelligence, personality, and work drive explain differences in student grade. The word explain. Okay, so the truth is that the predictor variable only predict student grades. They do not explain. Okay, so be careful with the language or the term that we use in interpreting our finding. Okay, due to that limitation. Okay, so I thought that's all. Is there any question?
Dr. Sitinomi, we do have 2 questions in the chat room. So
Okay.
I'll read it out. The first one is from Cik Wan. Hi doctor, I'm a bit confused between the difference of correlational and causal study. Given a scenario, let's say the study is an extension of the theory of planned behavior with an inclusion of additional variables. I'm running PLS SEM and all of the variables are one model.
Okay,
Is it
so means that
considered as causal type?
it is part of causal type if let's say you have the third variable, either it is moderator or mediator. But if let's say you just test for the direct relationship and then it is a cross-sectional study, then you should be very careful. Okay, you should be very careful.
Alright, so the second question from Mr. Muhammad Nakiuddin. Salam doctor, since a very large sample can affect the R value, may I know how big is the sample and any cut-off point for the sample size?
Okay, any cut-off point? There are actually, but depending on the types of design, because when you want to consider the number of sample size, there are a lot of considerations that you may put in your study. One of it is the types of design that you use. Okay, some researchers say that if let's say you conduct the experimental study, the number of samples should be smaller compared to non-experimental. And then if let's say you conduct the correlational study, the sample size can be smaller compared to the descriptive. Okay, in terms of the number, there are researchers even suggest the number as small as 30. Okay, another consideration then probably it is due to effect size. For example, the G-Power software. The G-Power software include the element of effect size in determine the sample size. Okay, and then even that we also have cohort. Okay, to check which one is mostly suitable for your study, then you need to try and error. Okay, based on the interest, based on your interest, what are the main elements that you want to include as the main indicator in your study to determine your sample size? There is no one sample size that fits all studies. Okay, there is none.
Alright, so Dr. Sitinomi has done with the presentation, yeah, doctor?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. I would like to say that to our trainer, Dr. Sitinomi. Dr. Nomi has shared with us a very rich information with regards to descriptive and correlational study in quantitative research design. So we learned about the tools used for quantitative data collection, statistical analysis, reliability and validity involved in quantitative research design, and many more actually. So we have more than 120 participants today. So I reckon everybody had a very fruitful session. We are now approaching the end of our webinar session, but before that, is there any more question that any of you would like to ask to our trainer? We are also live on YouTube, so perhaps those on YouTube would like to ask questions as well through the chat space. All right, so I think we have one more question in the chat room. From Ms. Idayu Rose, Assalamualaikum Doctor. If it is a causal study, do we have to include the correlation analysis at the data analysis part for chapter 3?
Okay, back to your research objective. Like if let's say you have any objective that related to association between variables, then you may include. Another thing is, let's say you want to provide some indication of reliability and validity, then you may use the correlation value lah to support the types of reliability or validity that you want to support for your selection of the instrument lah. Okay, depending on your objective, and then probably because sometimes the correlation you can use in reliability and validity. Okay, yeah, sure, you can contact me, sure. Okay, by the way, just to let you know that, yeah, later on I will share the slide with Kate, and then I'm sure they will post somewhere lah after this.
Okay, so anyone with other questions in mind? Let me just check at the YouTube live. So from YouTube live, we don't have any more questions. Okay, so if there's no question, Dr. Nomi and I would like to thank everyone for the time you shared with us today. And again, we sincerely thank Kate UPM for inviting us to join and contribute to this webinar session. So Dr. Nomi, would you like to say a few words before we end the session?
Okay, just thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate, again for the invitation, and then thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. And until we meet again, thank you everyone. Stay safe.
All right, thank you, Doctor. So Kate has forwarded a link here for attendance, just for your attention. For those who has not yet signed the attendance, probably you would want to do so. So all right, with that, I end today's session, and have a nice day, everyone. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.